general in Latin America, there's a lot of belief in spirits and ghosts and things like that. And if we go way back to a family home in Quito in Ecuador, the property is called La Floresta, which is the neighborhood that it lives in, where my grandfather bought this house. And before he bought the house, there was an old woman that owned it that passed away unexpectedly. And so when he bought the house and there were some contractors that were doing some work, like fixing the floorboards and everything else, they tore up some of the wood plank on the floor, and one of the contractors found a candle underneath the floorboards. So it sounds kind of odd, but just a wax candlestick. And apparently in Ecuador, in South America, this is a sign of, it's a bad omen, and it's a sign of death. So this contractor found the stick, and he died in his sleep that night. He knew what it was when he saw it, and he was afraid, and he left the job site, and he wound up dead. So right from the beginning of our family taking possession of the house, there was kind of a weird air about it. So beyond that, my grandfather moves into the house. He ends up having 9 kids with his wife. And I guess during the time of growing up, my dad is, I think, the 3rd youngest in the family. So again, family of 9, there's a lot of kids. And he himself had a lot of experiences sort of around the neighborhood and on the property. And one in particular, he recalls that there was a black cat one day. When he was very little, he was complaining about some food that my grandfather served him that he didn't like. And my grandfather insisted that, no, you have to finish this. Of course, this is the food we're presenting, you have to eat it. And my dad refused, and he started having a tantrum and went outside. And the way this property is outside the house, there's sort of a gated yard almost, with a couple of gardens. And nowadays, the gate has glass over top of it to prevent thieves and prevent pigeons. But when he was playing outside, the way he tells it, there was a black cat that had hopped up on top of the wall and was walking between the glass and between all of basically the spikes on top of the wall. And the cat was just staring at him so intently, and he saw fire in the cat's eyes. And the way that he interpreted it was that this was a spirit telling him he should be grateful for what he had, that the food on his plate, everything he was very fortunate. And so the cat jumped down from the wall and started hissing at him and just slowly creeping forward towards him. And my dad was a little kid, he didn't know what to expect. It wasn't often that cats or wild animals would be aggressive on the streets in Ecuador. Most of the time, if you think about stray animals, they usually run away and they'll just avoid you. But this cat just approached him and was swiping at the air and hissing at him. And eventually, my grandfather came outside, saw what was going on, and heard my dad crying and just yelling. And he came out with the broom and tried to chase the cat away. And eventually, he managed to just hit it, and it ran away and never came back again. On that property, my cousins have always joked about the fact that there's a ghost living in the house. And they believe that it has to do with going way back to the original owner with this candlestick, that the ghost placed it there. And nobody really knows what its intentions were at the time, but they do maintain that yes, there is a ghost living on the property. He doesn't mess with us, or at least he doesn't do anything bad, but every once in a while little tricks happen and little things. And I always took it as them just joshing me because they're older, they've been around. I think at this point, if I was 12, they would have been late teens, early 20s. So of course, they're my cool older cousins. And there was one day where everybody was talking about going to the market. And when we go to Ecuador, we're usually there for 3 weeks at a time. We have family up in the mountains where we were this time, like halfway down in the rainforest and then on the coast. So we were there, and we had been at this place for about a week. And everybody wants to go for a walk. I just didn't want it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I wanted to just stay home. I had brought an old laptop that I was using for Prince of Persia, but I remember staying behind while the rest of them went for a walk. So I have my laptop, and I'm in the spare bedroom, and there's a bed there, so I'm just lying on the bed, just playing the game. And it's worth noting that I charged the laptop overnight because I wanted to make sure I had battery power. So I'm lying on the bed, I'm just playing my game, and all of a sudden the computer just dies. And the battery level was pretty much full at this point. I'd only been playing for like 10-15 minutes, and my family had been gone for about that long. So the computer dies, and I thought that was odd, and I double checked. I'm like, okay, well, the power adapter's here. So I plugged it in and waited for the computer to boot up. Took a while. And it shuts down again. Even though the power is in, the battery is clearly charged, and I'd never had problems with this before. So I started to just get kind of annoyed, and I figured, well, it must be the power, it must be dirty power, something's going on. But anyway, I continue, I boot it back up, I get back into Prince of Persia, and I'm just sitting there playing, and there's nobody in the house, but all of a sudden, the light switch, I hear the sound of the light switch flicking, and the light in the bedroom goes off. And I'm thinking, well, this is odd, there's nobody home. So of course I call out, like, hello, Alfredo? Like, is any of my cousins are home? Nobody's there. And I get up, and I got this weird feeling, like, you ever feel like you're being watched? And the hairs kind of stood up on the back of my neck, but I checked the other rooms, there's nobody there. I went into the living room, the door's still locked. And I even opened the front door and just looked around, and there was nobody around. So I was kind of weirded out, but I stopped playing, and I just started reading a book instead, and I noticed again the light switch was off, and I didn't move it. So about an hour later, my family comes back, and I kind of whispered to my dad about something had happened, and my cousin overheard it. And he just came over, he's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. That's just the ghost in the house. And I thought he was joking. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Did you sneak in somehow, or did you leave? He's like, no, we were gone, but I'm telling you, that's just what happened. The ghost is here. He probably just wanted to mess with you because you decided not to come with us. And to this day, they still maintain, more than 20 years later, that that's what happened. And there was nobody else on the property at the time. So I've asked a lot of questions about that, and my cousins are not, I wouldn't say they're religious by any means, they're more spiritual, but they really maintain that this is common. And if I had been alone at home, and if there had been an evil spirit or anything in the house, the way that they always suggest to fight them off is you have to punch them only with your left hand, and you have to swear at them. And that's the only way to ward off the evil spirits if they're trying to cause trouble. On that same trip, towards the end of our time there, we'd already been down to the coast and visited family, and then we came back up to Quito in the mountains. And I got really, really sick. I don't know if it was like food poisoning or a virus, but there was a couple of days where I had a really bad fever and I couldn't keep anything down. And of course, my family decides to go for a fancy dinner at this restaurant that's right around a crater. And it's a famous place. So I remember going to the restaurant while everybody's sitting at this table having a fancy dinner. I was kind of curled up on a couch, not feeling well at all. And afterwards, we're driving home through the city to get back home. And at one stoplight, I remember I was just leaning in the car in the back seat, and I was just watching the scenery roll by, just people watching, because I wasn't feeling good. There was nothing else I could do. And I remember we stop at a stoplight, and there's a bus shelter. And I noticed, I was just paying attention to people walking past, but I turned my head towards this bus shelter, and when I looked, there was a figure dressed in black. And the only thing I remember seeing are just glints of eyes, just like jewels, almost like glowing at me. And it startled me, and it was really frightening. I turned away for a second to tap my sister's leg, and when I turned back, it was gone. But I remember for that 2 seconds when I actually looked over and saw this shape with these glowing eyes, I remember getting that same feeling at the house. I felt unsettled. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. there was something just profoundly wrong, and it filled me with a sense of dread almost immediately. And I still don't know what that meant, if it was kind of maybe punishing me for things that I'd felt or said earlier in the trip. Just that one moment, and I confided in my cousins when we got home from the dinner, and I told them what I'd seen, and all they said was, just be careful, like just keep your eyes open, you know, just stay with us. They took it very seriously. I've always felt more spiritual than religious. And I mean, I grew up going to Mennonite church, listening to pastors, and really just talking about the good in people. That's the whole Mennonite thing, is love thy neighbor, don't be a dick. That's really the main message. And so I've always felt more connected to the idea that what goes around comes around. And you can call it karma, you can call it whatever you want. But seeing that in Ecuador, and especially again having it reaffirmed by family that are generally good people and really hold on to these beliefs, it just made me question whether some of those ghost stories you hear, some of the paranormal activity, is it possible that there are actually spirits when people pass away because of accidents or because of wrongdoing? Is it possible then that we actually do need to be careful? And that experience in particular made me think I was miserable because I was sick. I couldn't enjoy this dinner. I did have a nice time otherwise when we were there, but it just made me think if I should be more grateful for things in my life. Even then, at 12 years old, it had me pause and reflect on why I was upset, and maybe did I get sick because of something I did? I still don't know. Something like that almost scares you into being a better person. If you really believe that that happened, or that some force will come for you, or I guess if you do believe that these things happen for negative reasons, and you do believe what goes around comes around, I've always tried to put out positive energy into the world. I don't want anything negative going out if I can avoid it. And accidents happen. You never know sometimes how something you do might affect someone emotionally. But I think it's always kind of encouraged me to generally just be positive as much as I can and be warm with people, because you never know what someone's going through, or if something you do or say to someone might confirm a negative belief that they have because of something that happened before you interacted with them. Most of the time you run into Latin folks, and they are very warm and very friendly. And some of it is from a religious background, because those are the teachings that they've learned through church and through family members that help instill that in them. And I'd say God-fearing is the right word for a lot of that. I think it is such a deep part of the culture. People wear a lot of jewelry, they wear crosses. I missed my opportunity for a gold chain years ago. But wearing those types of things, it is a symbol. It's very much ingrained in the cultural identity, and I think those beliefs are part of the reason that people from South America are the way they are. They are very grateful to have what they have, to share it with people, and generally just spread good news and good energy everywhere they go. I think I've had many moments, if I'm at home alone, where I do have a similar feeling. There's something nearby or someone, and you just have a feeling you're not quite alone. I've had dreams where my grandparents have visited me in the dream, and they don't necessarily say anything. If you can imagine in a dream when you're interacting with somebody, whether it's good or bad, oftentimes there's a conversation that happens. And again, on the Mennonite side with my upbringing, I don't necessarily believe in the Christian God, but I do believe in something. I believe there are forces, there's energy in the world at play. And my grandparents on my mom's side, the Mennonite side, they're definitely very religious. They were very devout in their beliefs, and the same thing, love thy neighbor, be a good person, share what you have with those less fortunate when you can. And in these dreams, it's been at certain times in my life when there's a major event or something I'm concerned about, it almost felt like they were just checking in, and nothing was said. It was just moments in a dream where all of a sudden there's my grandma or my grandpa, and they're not saying anything. They're just smiling at me the way I remember, and maybe putting a hand on my shoulder in the dream and giving me a sense of peace and of reassurance. So I do believe that whether or not we're aware of it, there are some spiritual forces around us at all times. And the energy that we're putting out with our actions, good and bad, it goes out there. And I don't know where it goes. I don't know what absorbs it. But I do believe in some way, if you are striving to be a good person and you're giving out good energy into the world, that good is going to come back to you. And I want to believe the same is true. If you're feeding bad energy into the world, then at some point it's going to come back around. You just don't know how or when.